Hey, YouTube friends. Wanted to talk and part of the lockdown and what we've seen with COVID-19. And that is a lot of people um, purchasing new cameras, and they're basically asking questions that are very basic about those cameras. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I think because there is this gear constantly. I mean, I think YouTube monetize the way you can add affiliate links and all of that, and not just YouTube, but other channels as well. It basically is very conducive to people trying to sell. And so when we go there looking for information and looking for insight into how to do certain things, or how to what to purchase, what kind of gear to use, we're often sucked into this whole vortex of people pushing and pumping products. Now, I've been shooting photos since I was in grade school and elementary school, and I learned to work in a darkroom back then with film. So I've had a long history with film. I still have a 1967 Canon FX. It's my father's, which I use. He's using a point and shoot now. But I've had a lot of experience with that, and spent a good portion of the last 10 years shooting video as well. Started doing it with the 5D Mark II. Before that, I was running around with the camcorder for fun as a kid. And but basically all of my video has been for clients, and it's been a lot of it's internal corporate stuff. And then there's also sorry about that. Forgot to put my phone on silent. Basic mistake there. But basically, being able to shoot a lot of corporate stuff, and now a lot of other stuff that's more internal for clients. I, picked up some experience, but also went through the trials and tribulations of what kind of gear to use, and what works and what doesn't work. And I think I think it's a basic question because that everyone has, and that's where a lot of these questions are coming from. But I think that people are getting sucked into that vortex of consumerism and buying things that they don't need. And when you go to these or in YouTube comments, and people are buying a $2, $3, $4, $5,000 camera, and then asking basic lighting questions or basic questions about the exposure triangle. Then we have to rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it. And my answer is often, are you buying the right camera? Did you pick the right camera? Do you have the right gear? The right gear is not always the most expensive or most feature-laden product out there. Did you get the right camera for the job? And more importantly, I like to try to guide people to resources where they can learn those basics. Because if you happen to buy a $3,000 camera as a beginner, maybe, but you still need that help, and you still need to figure out what the exposure triangle is, and you still need to figure out, the very basics of lighting and that type of thing. And I think the challenge here is that, again, getting back to that whole YouTuber syndrome, there's a lot of people out there that are just pumping and pimping product, and that's the bottom line. The challenge is that this whole universe seems to be geared towards monetizing and being able to, instead of use it as a great knowledge tool, the great equalizer as far as knowledge and information, which it is. People are still utilizing it as a tool to really push their affiliate links. And so they may be a Canon shooter, or a Sony shooter, or a Fuji shooter, and really they're just promoting that product in any way possible, because they make a portion from sales of that product when you go and click on those links. One promise that I made, and we made starting this stream, was that we were about the little guy. And it's always been about making do with what you have, finding ways to get stuff done, and doing it on a budget that is your budget and not somebody else's budget. If you're making a couple $100,000 or $500,000 a year doing whatever you do because of your all of the affiliate links and other, not just affiliate links, you're not going to make that kind of money off affiliate links, but other deals you have with manufacturers of products and partnerships, all of that is very it's very challenging to trust that. And so you have to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff when you're on YouTube, just like anywhere else on the internet, and look for those resources that are openly providing basic information or just want to have a conversation with you about the basic stuff. And so right now, that's what we're doing. And that's always been our mantra. And we'll continue to do it that way. I'll continue to do it that way. The people I work with, the affiliates or the groups that are affiliated with me, or the people that are affiliated with me, that's what we're all about. You're a small nonprofit, you're a small business, you're a solopreneur at home trying to make a go of it with the tools you have. And it could be a Rebel SL2, it could be an EOS R, it could be an M50. And so we want to encourage you and make sure that you don't leave this with a bad taste in your mouth, where you purchase all this expensive gear but aren't successful, or you're purchasing way more than you need to, maybe beyond your budget even, and that's always a concern. I think it's a conversation that needs to happen, because this is what is dominating YouTube right now, and it's dominating other areas as well. I've always shot with what is appropriate, and a lot of times, even in my Instagram feed, it's with my iPhone 11 Pro, just because it can do stuff for that little tiny square on somebody else's phone screen. That's more than enough. I'm not posterizing that image. I'm not doing, it's more about the technique and what I use, how I frame it. That's what I'm curious about. And hey, the best camera you have is the one you have on you. And I'm walking around, walking around the city or going for a bike ride, sitting on the beach. I'm going to snap something with my iPhone and not carry around the R5. I mean, the R5 is a great camera, don't get me wrong, but it's not a cheap camera. It's not a cheap camera, and it's not something that you'd probably just run around with just to shoot, all over the place. A lot of times what I'll do, people talk about vlogging. Well, you're going to YouTube. Yes, YouTube does 4K, and yes, you can shoot in 4K and then upload it in 1080 to YouTube or what have you. But realistically, people are looking at your phone with a tiny little screen like that. I think the best camera right now for a YouTuber and for somebody that's shooting straight up vlog type stuff is the M50 or the M6 or the new M50 Mark II when it comes out. It's the ideal size. It's super light. I can carry this around. I shove it into a pocket in my golf bag, throw it in my glove box. I've got the 16mm Sigma lens on here now, and it's a great lens. It gives me amazing photos. It's a crop sensor. And there are a lot of pros out there using crop sensors and Fuji cameras and others. And there are people that live by these for sports and action photography, maybe not the M5, of course, but, people are using the 7D Mark II. The point is, use what works for the job. When I'm running around, running over to grandma and grandpa's house, and I just want to bring a camera because it's a birthday party or something, I'm taking this camera. I have been taking my R5 a lot more lately, or the R that I'm shooting on in the past, just because I'm playing around with a few things. But realistically, I've always used what fits the job. At work, at my day job, I shoot video using the Canon cinema cameras, a C200, C100 even, and there's a day we use a C300 as well. Use a Lumix there, but we've kind of phased that out, a GH5, but been focused. I've actually been using more of the cameras, the Canons, because they match colors better. So the EOS R, the R5, but my M50 is still a part of my workflow. As a matter of fact, sometimes I need more reach. I was shooting an air show for some pro shots, some shots that were requested from my employer. And I use the M50 with a long lens on it. I slapped the 7200 on the M50 because I didn't have an extender and I wanted to get some tighter shots of the planes and in their flyovers. And then I use the R with a, I think it was a 24-105, just to get some wider shots and crowd shots. It was outside. I mean, it was the two. I have other lenses. I have other lenses that are, the bigger apertures, but I didn't need them for broad daylight shots. I still had my 70 or 24-70 in a bag, and I actually had a 51-4 as well. Didn't use them though, because I had the right tools for the job, and so that's just it. I mean, you need to have that ability to discern that. If you're asking questions about the basics of photography, I strongly recommend you get a camera like this, which you can shoot the M50 or the M6, or I think get the one with the viewfinder. That's why I say the M50. It works, for what you need and for the price you get it for. Try it out. Use it. If you're starting out as a YouTuber, if you're an established YouTuber, there are plenty out there that use the M50. It's a great camera. And so for me, I think don't throw a lot of money at it before you know you even like it. You can get great success on an iPhone. There are YouTubers that have used iPhones for years. There are people that are, that do vlogs that have used action cameras, like I have back on the shelf with my lenses back there. Really, it's about having being reasonable as far as what your outlay is. I mean, we all have lives. We all have to put a roof over our heads. We all have to buy a dinner. But also making sure that we're using the right tools for the job. And really, if you're exclusively making videos for YouTube or your food blog, or taking photos for your food blog for that matter, the M50 is more than enough. It's a great camera for that. I have a 11-22 lens back there. It's an f4 to 5.6. I have the Sigma 16 mil lens here, which is an f1.4, 1.6. I forget what it was, but anyway. And I have the 22 f2 back there as well, which is a 35 mil full frame equivalent. The 16 is a 24 mil full frame equivalent. And they're great for just walking around, for getting street shots, for food photography, for stuff like that. If I'm out traveling and I want to get a great shot of a plate at some restaurant or something like that, it's a great camera. If I'm riding a roller coaster and I want to carry something light with me, I'm carrying that, not my R5. If I'm out at the golf course, again, something like that, out at the beach, that's what you go with. And again, like I said, I've published photos from that in documents and in journals using that M50. I also use the R that I'm shooting this vlog on. But I think there has to be a rethink. And it's something that we need to talk about more on YouTube and on other channels. And that is, why are we pushing for this consumerist culture? We don't need to be pushing the consumerism as much as we are. We need to be sensitive to our followers and our viewers and what they're struggling with, or what they're maybe not struggling with, but what their challenges are, what they're trying to figure out. And that's where we need to go. And if you want to be, and if you don't want to be disingenuous, if you want to be honest with yourself and honest with others, let's have a real conversation about tools. Now, I have no problem with people that, may be sponsored by a product or something, but they talk about the product in a descriptive term, and they're talking more about technique rather than that this feature set or this feature set is blah, blah, blah. I mean, the R5 and R6 came out, and I've been a Canon shooter since 1970, 74, 75, when my dad first handed me that FX that's on the shelf there. And I use the R5, and I've always had a 5 series camera. I've always, early on when the 5D2 was out, I also tried to grab a crop camera because that was the easiest way for me to get the reach with that camera. And it worked. It just worked for me. And I think that that's something too that people need to realize is, again, making do with what you need. But I've never had a huge budget to purchase stuff. And yes, I did in the last, maybe 10 years or so, had a good budget because I was basically, this gear was earning me money. But if you're not earning money with this gear, then you don't need the latest and greatest of everything, and you probably should be more mindful of having the bare minimal or what you do need. So, I mean, I'm starting this conversation. I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to continue to talk about this because, for our environment, for even basic human rights stuff. I mean, a lot of the consumer stuff we're using is produced in countries where there's human rights abuses, and you have racism and sexism and other isms that are playing into even the production of this and the culture. And when we go and buy stuff in stores, whether it's T-shirts made in some developing country where workers are abused or mistreated, or running shoes, or electronics, we need to be mindful of that. And we also need to be mindful of what all this stuff, when it's tossed away, which eventually it will be, what it means to the environment and to our planet. And after those two thoughts, I mean, I think we also need to focus more on being honest and not being disingenuous with what we're presenting and why we're presenting it online on this forum. And so we need to be able to really hone in on what we do, why we're doing it, and explaining more about the process and the reasoning behind it, and using the right tools versus buy this because it's got this label on it. And that applies to honestly, all aspects of life, not just camera gear and photography gear and video gear. But it is a conversation that has to be repeated over and over again. And so I might be, repeating myself ad nauseum on this channel, but I think it's very important. I think we need to assess that. We need to assess what we're using. I don't need in Canada, $6,000 R5 to stream video. I don't need that to take to a kid's birthday party. $500 M50. Was it $699 with a kit lens here in Canada? That's more than enough. And so we're going to try to help you with that in this channel. And I want you to share your stories. I want you to comment below and let me know what you think. Share your thoughts about how you've done it on a budget, what kind of camera you used. I want you to tell me about the most budget friendly setup you had that worked, and how you got paid using that budget setup. And really, that's what I want to know, because there are a lot of people out there that really want to know that. Even myself, even when I was getting paid for gigs, wanted to know what's the best tool I could get to do this without killing my credit card or stretching out my budget for the next 6 months. So I think that's very, very important. And I want you to share those opinions down below. Please share those comments, because people need to know. And if you're a pro and you're getting paid to shoot photos or video, let's talk about not the latest gear that you got, but in the comments below, I'd like you to put in a story about what you use, whether it's stacking your camera on cardboard boxes because you couldn't afford a tripod at the time, or something like that. I want to hear those stories. I mean, I've done that. I've used stacks of books. The tripod I'm using, I looked at desktop tripods, went online, even tried to find it on Amazon, although I prefer to shop local. I want to give local businesses a business and my business, and keep that money local. But I actually looked at Amazon looking for a desktop tripod, and then I had this Velbon, or I don't think it's Velbon, I forget, Vivo. It's a tripod, it's a mechanical, and I'll do a little story on this, but it's something my dad picked up in the late 60s, all metal, made in Japan. It's everything is manual. It's even got a little flash release on it. Beautiful little piece of design. Like, it's gorgeous, and it's sitting on my desk. It's all stainless steel with aluminum. And I'm like, I've been keeping this thing because I thought it was beautiful, and my dad gave it to me, and I thought, this is great. But now it's sitting underneath my EOS R. It's a perfect desktop tripod. It also goes to full, like 6 feet, whatever, when you pull the legs out, but it's got a little crank on it, so you can actually raise and lower the camera, and it works beautifully. So things like that. I mean, let's hear those stories. I want you to talk about that. And I know I have R5 in the title here, because that's what sort of really piqued this for me, as somebody that was hanging on to my old 5D Mark II, which I still use. My daughter's learning on it now. She's only 9, but I have still used it for pro shoots. I still take it out on photo gigs, and I have a 70 to 200 EF L lens on there that I use with that camera exclusively. And now I've been pairing my R and my R5 more. But when I was looking at the R5, I wanted to have that conversation. I wanted to know, because I was trying to justify it in my mind, and I wanted to see what people are thinking out there, and it just led me to this conversation. What are we doing with gear? Are we getting the right gear for the job? Are we being mindful of these other things, the environment, about the social structure of society, and what we can do better? And the gear that we use can actually help us make change in those areas. I like a lot of the work. I choose Canon just because of their ubiquity around the world, and the fact that you can get Canon products anywhere. I've talked about the village in Nepal and that kind of thing, or when I was visiting part of India where I was at it was literally a little convenience store hut on the side of a road in the jungle, and I was able to find a Canon battery, which I needed. That kind of thing makes a big difference to me. But again, it's out of need and necessity and for my work. However, if I am, looking at what, a product that lasts, I mean, the 5D Mark II, I've had 10 plus years of use out of that. That is fantastic. And I used it to this day, and it's not only earned me money, but it's also prevented me from buying another camera to replace it for 10 years. And I'm hoping to get the same out of the R5, or even a good 5 to 7 years, which would justify it easily. I'm not flipping cameras every 2 years. I'm not saying, okay, well, the latest A7 R1, 2, 3, 4, whatever is out, or the new, and that's one thing that sort of enamored me to Canon too, is they don't release a new camera every year from that same line. They're a little bit more careful and deliberate about what they bring out. And so I choose it because of that as well. But I want to have those discussions. I want to hear you in the comments below. Tell me what you think. Kind of starting to run on a little bit now, and I do have a tendency to do that. But I do want to hear those stories. I want to know what made you decide, why this is what works for you, and basically, if that is something that if that's something that's made your job easier, do you still use that technique, or do you still use those products? What is the best budget solution you had? If you have links to your videos, put them down there in the description. Again, I'll share those as well, and on our social channel, on our Facebook and other channels as well. But I'd like to hear from you about that. I think this is the value. This is, when we talk about internet freedom and, the open net and the free sharing of information and sharing of knowledge, and how important it is to human civilization, YouTube can enable that. But I want us to work on enabling that, rather than padding the pockets of the giant corporations that happen to pump their products through various bloggers and whatnot. So let's have that conversation. Let's think green. Let's think about the environment, but also let's think about our social consciousness and our ability to tell stories in the most effective way possible. I'm going to leave you with that, but please do like, please do comment, please share, subscribe to the channel. We're going to continue these conversations. We want to have more of these conversations over the months and years ahead. Thanks. And, just grab a piece of gear and just go shoot, use your phone camera, just go create. It's all about doing, it's all about creating what you have here. And then, basically how you perceive the world around you. Go make art. Thanks.